Hey, good morning. So another video of things that I think people might find useful, trying to leverage command line coding agents in file management. So the idea today is, as you can see from the title, is a Reddit report. So I wanted an easy way to scrape, understand, and analyze Reddit opinion on a company or a topic. But obviously the real value in that is slightly how it changes over time and the narrative drift that you get within those threads. So as I did previously with one of the other scrapers, I thought that it would be helpful to kind of plan how my stream of consciousness worked when this idea came to mind. So the first question is the data question, and how do I get the data? So I already know, having built this before, that the Reddit API is quite hard to get access to. So we're not going to use the API, and we actually use web retrieval, which I know that has been good for me historically. And so we're going to use that version of data retrieval. So we know that this is going to be a web scrape. And what we know from that, if anybody read my data pipeline rules from a previous video, is that we therefore know that the trust and reliability of web scrape, or indeed memory of a large language model, can be unreliable. And therefore, there is some uncertainty that exists within this. And as a result, we then have to make sure that we are doing some verification before we get our large language model to do the processing and output. So in this particular example, when we start running our testing, we should make sure that we cherry pick a couple of posts from the subreddit that we're looking at in order to just make sure that we're pulling all of the right ones. The easiest way to do this is try and pull most recent and then pull one that's kind of 10 historically, so that you can match them up and make sure that we're pulling the right data. In terms of how you would do verification design, one thing that I thought of a lot around this tool is that it's not that helpful to just have this kind of super long Python script, and then you have to go in and be fiddly and changing the subreddit that you want to look at. So really the way to solve that as a team is to have a front end, really simple front end where anyone can go in and you can put in the URL for your Reddit thread, and then you can give some small instructions like, we'd like to understand what people think about product, or whether people think about working there, or what people think about management. Maybe that's a good example. And you can then run the report accordingly. So what we will do from a verification perspective is we'll make sure that we are counting the number of comments and posts that we fetch, and then have a kind of broad sense of what the expected count might be. We should also have in verification checks the date range of the comments and posts that we're pulling. Again, all of these things are kind of sense checky, so you can kind of understand what the data your scraper is pulling. And then we can obviously do those spot checks that I thought about. And then obviously on the UX perspective, I just mentioned we need that simple front end. So it's flexible for multiple users and multiple threads. And then the last thing we really need to think about is kind of on the output perspective in when we're generating, like what are we generating first of all, and what do we want to be included in whatever we're generating. So the first thing is we want a report, obviously, and within that report we want a number of things. So the first thing we probably want is we want sentiment over time. On a particular theme, we probably want upvote-weighted versus unweighted. So to give context, I don't know if there are people here that don't use Reddit. Within Reddit, if a comment is particularly well believed by the audience that's watching it, you give it an upvote, which is a super helpful thing to be able to toggle on and off. And then we also want probably general key themes. So in case you're searching for the wrong thing, if you're searching for product quality, but actually everyone's complaining about the management team, it's always good for those things to be flagged. And I think we want evidence with that too. So you want to be able to click through to some of the underlying posts. And then you also want a bit of a what's changed section. And that's probably it. And the output format is very easy in a markdown file, but people could spruce it up and have it in a PDF, or you could have it delivered via email. But again, adding slight complication to what we're doing right now. A bit of a change of scene here. We're actually going to be using Codex today instead of Claude Code, which is OpenAI's CLI coding agent. The reason being is that over the last couple of weeks, I've really found it to be significantly better in terms of accuracy from a one-shot perspective. And for those who don't know, one-shot is where you just give it one big prompt that's really well scoped, and it just goes off and does the task. It's much better than Claude Code at the moment. Claude Code is, for me, a little bit better on an iterative basis. But if you want something done well and done properly and done once, Codex on 5.3 and extra high will be better, in my view. Interested to hear views if people have tried otherwise. So I'm just going to go and fetch my prompt from a separate page, and I am going to paste it in here. So one thing that I'll just talk about now, in that instead of me asking people to comment for here's the prompt, or here's the planning stage, or this is how I think about data pipelines, I think going forward, I'm super keen just to try and build out in the open. And so people will just have access to the GitHub repository, which will have all of the code in, which means that you can just clone it straight out of my GitHub, or have your IT team do it, and then spin up the front end that I have, and have the back end hosted, and you will just be able to run this code as I am here. So Codex is now going. I'm going to go off and do some other bits and pieces, and I will come back shortly once it has finished. Okay, Codex has done its first pass. So here we are. We can see some of the output of the things. So I'm now going to ask it, assuming it's done what it's meant to do, spin. It's always nice to be polite. Okay, so now it looks like we're up and running in localhost. Currently, site can't be reached, which is always a great start. Again, I suppose one of the key practices of using your coding agent is that trying to write down your stream of consciousness straight into the coding agent so it understands exactly what the problem is or what you're dissatisfied with, and it will continue to work accordingly. Okay, here we go. We can see that within this front end that there's a Reddit URL expectation here. And so let's go have a look at the team viewer Reddit. Copy and paste the URL. Generate the report. So we can see an error here, and this is where the debugging process will start. So again, what I've done is just copy and pasted the URL that I put through, and then copy and pasted the error that I got, and we'll let Codex get working accordingly. Codex, and that it was coming back to saying that this wasn't a thread, this was a full subreddit feed. I think for the purpose of this, it's helpful to be able to do the analysis over the highest possible level, rather than having to go into an individual thread, which could be about anything, in order to do this analysis properly. So what it's proposing here is it's proposing that, yes, fine, you can put in a full subreddit feed, but it's just going to use the first thread within that. You can see that because of the relative complexity of really what we're trying to do, it takes a little bit more toing and froing. This isn't, sadly, a one-shot effort. Partly the reason that I'm keen to share a finished repository rather than trying to share a prompt, because there's quite a lot of engineering in inverted commas that has to be done once you get kind of through the gates, and being able to scope and think about that really clearly probably makes a little bit of a difference. Equally, some are blessed with time and some are not. So you can see that I've just typed that I want Codex to be running its own tests before me having to test it within the Streamlit front end, which we can see in my Chrome browser here. The reason being is that getting the core Python script that sits underneath working first is much more important, because any errors that come out of that would then compound all the way through. And likewise, you could see that in the front end, that first error that we got was it was expecting a different JSON shape, which basically meant that we were trying to put a square peg in a circular hole. The data expected format was not what it expected, and therefore it didn't really work. So the luxury that we have now with Claude Code and Codex and Gemini's CLI is that you can do all of the testing of the scripts that you're writing without having to do it within whatever front end that you've built, which is super helpful, but also makes development significantly faster. Look at that, Codex actually beat me to it, and it's doing its own live test without me having to tell it to. And rightly so, it's saying that it might take a little bit because it fetches each thread in the feed and is trying not to get rate limited. Rate limiting is basically where websites are pre-designed to block you out if you do too many requests, usually in two regular intervals, because it's then obviously some sort of robotic script that is doing it for you. So you can see now Codex has come back and said that the app now processes all thread posts in the subreddit feed, not just the first. It's obviously then telling me what changed, etc., etc. I'm going to say for it to saying for it to spin up the Streamlit app. Streamlit is the brand or type of app that we've built here in our browser, and crucially, we obviously now want to try and see what the output looks like. So it's now running on the server. Let's just say it's not running. There we go. It's now running properly. You can see this, it's gone the icon on the top, which gives you a sense of what's going on. Again, let's copy and paste this across and try and generate that report. There we go. So it's fetched 1,222 comments. The expected comments are 1,258. It deleted or removed is kind of 4%. Reddit returned more placeholder nodes, 2 nodes, which indicates not all comments are present in this unauthenticated approach. In fact, 1,222 comments and a few spot checks here. Let's kind of check whether this is real. This looks like it's a real thread, which is always nice to see. And then here we've got the themes and evidence here. Look, I've got an Anthropic error here, which means it probably wasn't pulling my API key. And here is a bit of sentiment over time. Again, this is something that you would dial in over time. Not quite sure why that didn't change, but this is on an unweighted basis. We've obviously seen some fairly big points of negativity, specifically at the back end of 2025, but it does look like things are getting a little bit better. Again, that's something that you would probably want to go in and have a read of yourself, but this is always really nice to have as a first pass. So I'm going to go back and do one quick thing, but let's fix. So what I'm telling it here is that this all looks good, which is obviously great. Great to see this type of report, but we want to fix the Anthropic error that we're getting, which is going to help us summarize the themes and the evidence that sit within that, et cetera, et cetera. You'll notice that it added that we could download the report in HTML or in Markdown. Let's try and run it by HTML, and you can see there's another way that you can look at it here. I suppose the important thing generally speaking with these is that you have it in a format which you can choose and that is most useful to you, where you don't feel that you're totally bogged down with detail and text. So I'm going to do two things here. I'm just going to ask Codex to sort out the Anthropic issue, and then I'm probably just going to ask it to make it look a little prettier, and then we'll move on from there. I'm just going to steer it twice. I'd like it to use Opus 4.5. Super powerful model means that we're going to get the best possible contextual understanding of the themes within the Reddit thread that we pull. And then I'm also going to tell it that in the meantime, could you also make the front end look a little bit nicer? So you can see that Codex has now completed the redesign and sorted out my Anthropic issue, and it's now restarting the front end. Here we go, we're up and running again. This is what it looks like. Let's take the team viewer again, generate the report, and it is working. You can see by this icon in the top right. And there's definitely some, definitely looks better, but we're just waiting for, yes, the text isn't very good. Okay, we've had a bit of a front end change. Let's see if we can give this a go now. And here we go. Here are our spot checks as we were doing before. And we can now work through on here. So the theme extraction failed. Sentiment still going. Chart looks relatively similar. Manual check's still there. Exports are still there. Themes have not been generated. So you can see here that the error is that the model didn't return a valid JSON. JSON is a way of formatting text data, and it allows our front end to receive it and format it in a way that we'd expect it to, with all of the nice titles and bullet points and all those types of things. So that's something that we can get fixed pretty quickly. So I've just said that instead of us trying to be really deterministic about the type of text format that we receive and then how we process that, I basically just said that, like, cool, like if we get it in the format that we want, then great. But if we just get it in Markdown, which is the, I suppose, the easiest form of text, or just text output, then at least we can see what that looks like. All of these types of dotting I's and crossing T's can all be done afterwards, but the focus of this video is obviously to be able to show a fully working tool, and all of these tabs have actual stuff in them, and just themes is obviously what we're missing currently. Okay, we're back up and running again. You can see Codex outputting the summary of what it's just done, so let's try and generate this report again. Still no themes generated. So you can see that I've gone back and said there's still no themes generated and there's no error this time. And so it makes me think that that's because the runtime is too short, like it's maybe 5 seconds. I just don't think that Claude Opus 4.5 can process, I don't know, 1,222 posts, I think it was, in the overview. Yeah, 1,222 posts in the overview in that amount of time and output accordingly. So what it's saying here is that it is actually outputting blank. So it's not timing out. It's probably that it's not ingesting the information properly. So again, Codex is going back to sort that out, which is great. Right, so Codex has come back and said that we were right about the runtime token limit. So what it's done is it's now doing batched processing of the data, which is something that we've had to battle with large language models ever since they came out. The context windows are definitely much larger, but originally when they were very small, we were having to batch information, pushing them through, and then there is huge amounts of documentation out there around best practice of pushing that all together. You can see that there were some validation tests here. The app is now allegedly running, but the fourth time lucky, it says it's running, it's actually working. So let's generate this report now. There we go, we've got a generated report, and the moment of truth. We have evidence first themes, and we can fix a lot of this, but this is the supporting documentation of each theme. But what is it saying is that there's some issues with licensing and business practices, there's some user sentiment, company perception notes, and then lots of talk about migration to alternatives, which is pretty interesting. One thing that would be an extension to this tool is being able to look through a specific subreddit and then specify a theme. So if we then wanted to drill down on the sentiment or frequency of any of these themes, we'd then be able to run that separately. But maybe that's something that I do as a separate video. But thank you for watching. Please shout if you've got any questions. In the same way, if there are any tools that you think would be interesting to build and you'd like a tutorial and don't mind the rest of the market seeing it, then please shout. Thank you.